Okay, welcome class. So today we're going to be talking about recipe costing. So right now I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to not put on my camera just because I want you to focus on the numbers and not worrying about anything else other than that. So for your assignment, so you have a couple assignments, right? Due um, supposedly this weekend, but I'm going to extend the due date because I'm just now getting to put those videos on. But you have your quiz one, which is part of the first part of the PNL, and then you have your costing part two, which is also part of the PNL. And we'll look at that in just a minute, just so I can show you what you're going to be looking for. But today we're going to be doing the recipe costing, and I'm actually going to do this one with you all, just so you all have an idea. But it's going to be very important that you know how to do this on your own because it's going to be part of your project and probably going to be on your final exam, having to cost out your own recipe on there. So just be mindful, even though I'm going to work together with you, that you get a better understanding of how to cost out your recipe. So to access the specific recipe that you're going to be using, you're going to click on the PDF file and it'll open up. You can download this at home and print it out and fill out the information um, at home. But let's first go through um, this form. So this is a standardized recipe costing form. So we talked about this at the very beginning of the semester, menu planning, right? How do we come up with a recipe? How do we cost out the recipe? Why do we do it? The reason that we cost out our recipe is for consistency and so that we can ensure that when we are creating a menu that we are pricing it appropriately. If we didn't cost out our recipe and we just kind of threw things into a mixer to make bread, or like this recipe, mix things together to make a quiche, then we don't know what the cost of each ingredient is and what the total cost of the recipe is and what the portion cost is. Um, and we need all those things. They're very important because that'll tell us how much we need to sell it at. And if we sell it at a price that is below or that is below what it actually costs us, then we lose money, right? So we want to make sure that um, our portions are appropriate for the cost of all of our ingredients and the cost of the recipe. So let's look at the way the form is set up, what each little category means before we even get started with the math, right? So typically on a recipe costing form, you're going to see the menu item. You'll list it here. So for this particular menu item, we're making a bacon spinach quiche, but that could be anything, right? Carrot cake. It could be focaccia. It could be I don't know, eggs Benedict. Um, but in particular for this one, the menu item is quiche. So we definitely want to write down the date that it was prepared, right, and who it's prepared by. Why? So that we can track the recipe. And we can also track the cost of our ingredients at the time, because we all know the economy can change, our price of our ingredients can change. Therefore, maybe this recipe isn't updated and we need to know when it was last updated. Or the price, does the price reflect what current pricing is for these ingredients? If not, we need to update it so that we're getting the most accurate cost of our recipe, cost of our portion, so that we can sell it appropriately. Um, as you can see, during the pandemic, the price of eggs went up, the price of butter went up, the price of protein went up. So definitely during that time period, the costing of this recipe needed to be updated to reflect those price changes. So here are the prices that we're using. These are general prices. They probably don't reflect what market prices are right now for these particular ingredients. But just for this recipe and as an example, we'll use these prices. You definitely want to put prepared by so we know if there was a mistake. Maybe there's a mistake in pricing. Maybe there's a mistake in the quantity that was written on there. We want to know who we can go to so that we can figure out and create a solution for any issues that may arise. Recipe yield, that's how much this recipe is going to make, whether it's 3 quarts of chicken salad, right? Or 12 slices of banana nut bread. But for this particular recipe, it's going to make 8 slices of the quiche. And our portion size is 1 slice. 1 slice is going to equal 4 ounces. And so the total amount of ounces for the whole quiche is going to be 32 ounces, right? Because 8 times 4 would be 32 ounces. So the categories listed below are going to be ingredients is the first one because we need to know what ingredients are going to go into our recipe. And then quantity is how many. So if you had a recipe in front of you and it said half a cup of heavy cream, that's the quantity. So we need a half of whatever the unit is, right? So for eggs, we need 6 eggs. So that's the quantity. That's how much we're going to be using in the recipe. And then we have unit. Unit can be placed either in volume or weight. And you're going to see some different units in other recipes that you have to cost out. Typically for pastry, we like to cost out a recipe in grams just because it helps us create a consistent product and there's not a fluctuation in the way one person measures versus another. Maybe if you're measuring with a measuring cup and you're using a 1 cup measuring cup and you're measuring flour, that person might not tap out the flour. Maybe they're not pouring the flour in and they're just scooping it and packing it in. The weight of one person packing in flour versus one who's spooning flour in and then leveling it off is going to be completely different. So for pastry, we like to do it in grams just so we can get it consistent. But in the culinary side, they typically use these types of units here. So you can see for eggs, because we're not weighing out our eggs, we're using a specific number of eggs. We're going to put EA, that means each. For heavy cream, this is typical cups, right? Sometimes tablespoons if you're using like measuring spoons if you're using a smaller amount of this. And this can also be put down in grams and ounces. But typically we're going to be using cups. Spinach, we're going to be using ounces. So OZ is abbreviation for ounces, if you didn't know that already. And then the capital T is abbreviation for tablespoon. So it's going to be very important that if you are not aware, or maybe you've forgotten because you did that at the very beginning of the semester, knowing what these abbreviations mean so that you know how to convert as we start to break down the larger quantity into a smaller unit. AP means as purchase price. So when we purchase the eggs, maybe the dozen eggs is going to cost us $2.59, right? When we purchase our heavy cream, maybe this quart of heavy cream is going to cost us $3.92. So that's how much we purchase it at, okay? AP quantity is how much this ingredient was, right? What was the quantity of the ingredient? So if I go to the store, they're not going to sell me a half dozen eggs. They're going to sell me a dozen. If I go to the store, they might have a quart. They might have a pint of heavy cream. So I want to make sure that I write that down. If I put a quart, then that's okay. I can put a quart, but I know that a quart equals 32 ounces, so we're going to put 32 ounces. If I go to the store, they might have a half gallon or a gallon, right? So it would specifically say half gallon or gallon. Here, the G is designated for gallon. If I'm going to the store and I purchased spinach, it was in a 1 pound bag. It's going to cost me $4. So this little pound symbol also means pound. So you could put a pound symbol, you could put LB, or you can even write out pound. And the same thing with the bacon. Maybe the bacon is a specific ounce, maybe it's a pound, maybe it's 2 pounds. But for this particular grocery store item, right, I purchased 24 ounces of bacon at $9.49. And the same thing with the pie crust and the salt. Our unit cost, how we're going to figure this out is we are going to break down our unit. So if our specific ingredient is eggs and we got a dozen eggs, we're going to be taking our as purchase price. So we went to the store and we got the eggs and they were $2.59. Well, we're going to divide it by 12 because that's how many is in a dozen. So now I'm going to get my unit cost, and that's going to mean that I'm going to be able to know how much one egg costs me. And that's what we're going to do for each of these today. Once we do that, then we're going to figure out the total amount. So total amount is basically we're taking that one egg and we're multiplying it by how many we need for the recipe. So that one egg times 6 is going to give us the total amount of what it costs for us to have 6 eggs in our recipe. And once we get all of those calculations, then we're going to total our recipe. So that's going to be the cost of our recipe. All we're going to do is add up all these rows until we get the total cost of the recipe. And then the proportion cost is us taking that total cost and dividing it by how many portions we get out of the recipe. So we know that this quiche yields us 8 slices. So we're going to divide that cost by the 8 slices. And then lastly, we're going to figure out what we should sell our product as. So the selling cost with a markup of 300%. So typically in the restaurant, you want to mark up 3 times. So that's what the 300% is. And that's going to be different for the different markets that you're in, right? Maybe you live in an area that has a lower socioeconomic environment, right? So not everybody can afford that. Maybe like the hourly rate or what people get paid is much lower because the cost of living is lower. So your price point can't be too high for that product because then your customer won't see the value in it, right? Or they can't afford it. But if you live somewhere in New York, the cost of living is higher, the wages are higher, ingredients are more expensive. So our cost markup might be a little bit higher because people can afford it a little bit more. And let's see. Okay, so this was just talking about what the recipe costing form looks like. Now we're gonna get to the nitty-gritty of actually costing out the recipe. So if you haven't, if you've forgotten how to convert your recipes, whether it's how many ounces are in a gallon, how many cups are in a gallon, how many quarts are in a gallon, it's good to find a conversion sheet online. This one is super detailed. Of course, there's little diagrams like the big gallon, like the big G, and then inside the G it has all the cups, pints, ounces that are in each. And that's good to have too as a resource to use until you become more familiar, because as you get into the kitchen, those are kinds of things that you need to have memorized, because on a daily basis you're doing math and you're converting. And so you'll need to know how many ounces are in a gallon, how many tablespoons are in a cup, how many ounces are in a pound. So all these things need to become very second nature for you, so that you're able to convert and do these costing of the recipes much faster as you get into the workforce. Okay, so I'm going to be opening up I'm going to be sharing a different screen. This one right here. Okay, so essentially this is the same as your assignment online, right? The only thing that's missing, of course, are the last 2 columns, but the same items are still on there. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be figuring out unit cost. So because we know that there are 12 eggs in a dozen, we're going to be taking $2.59, which is the cost of our as purchased price of the eggs that we get at the store, and we're going to divide it by 12. And that's going to give us, make sure you have your calculator so that you can figure out the unit cost. And when we're figuring out and typing up our unit cost measure amounts here and in total amount, we want to make sure that we use up to the fourth decimal on the unit cost and the total amount. So for my unit cost of eggs, each egg is going to cost me 0.2158. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for each of these ingredients. So heavy cream is 32 ounces, so I'm going to take $3.92 divided by 32 ounces. Oops, 3 divided by 32 ounces, and this is going to give me how much each ounce is going to be. And so here it's not ounces, right? But once I know how many ounces are in a cup, how many ounces are in half a cup, how many ounces in a quarter cup, well, then I can figure out what my total amount is going to be. But right now we're just focusing on how we're going to break down these units to their individual unit, right, or quantity. So this is going to come out to 0.1225. And again, I'm taking my as purchased price and I'm dividing it by the as purchased quantity so that I can get the smallest unit. Okay, so I know in a gallon that there are 16 cups. I also know that in a gallon there's 128 ounces. So for me, I'm going to divide it by 128 ounces. You could do it by 16 cups. That's going to give you a different number here, but ultimately you're going to get the same number in your total amount. So if you do that and I'm looking at your assignment, I'm still going to mark that correct because you're getting the same total amount. And I know that either way, I'm going to get the same number. So I'm going to do it by 128 ounces because that is the smallest unit that I can go to. So I'm going to take $4.22 and I'm going to divide it by 128 ounces. And that's going to give me oops, 0.0329. Okay. Next, I know that in a pound, I'm going to be getting 16 ounces in a pound. So what I'm going to be doing is, again, taking my as purchased price and dividing it by 16 ounces. That's going to give me 0.25 per ounce. I'm going to do the same thing with the Parmesan. So $7.36 for Parmesan, and it's a pound, which equals to 16 ounces. So I'm going to divide that by 16 ounces. So 7.36 divided by 16, and that's going to equal out to 46 cents per ounce. And you don't have to put the unit you're breaking it down to. You could just put 0.46 and I'll know exactly what you are meaning. Or you can write sorry. You can just say each or ounce, right, for each of these. Okay, so for the next one, the bacon cost me $9.49, and I'm going to divide it by the 24 ounces. 9 divided by 24 ounces equals 0.3954. And then because our pie crust, when we bought it, it was $2.60 for each pie crust. We're only using one pie crust, so that I don't have to do any calculations. That's just going to be $2.60. Okay, salt. So there are 16 ounces in a pound. So here I have to do a little bit more math because I'm going to be multiplying each pound by 16 ounces because I have 4 of them. So that's going to give me 16 times 4 is 64. So I'm going to take $1.50. Oops. 50 and multiply, $1.50, and we're going to divide it by 64 because there are 64 total ounces, so I'll just put 64. And that's going to give me 0.0234. Okay, perfect. So now I know my unit cost for each item. Now I'm going to start calculating the total amount for each ingredient. So for the first one, this is going to be really easy, right? We're going to take our unit cost, which is per egg, and now we're going to multiply it by the quantity we need for the recipe. So this one is going to be 0.2158, which is the unit cost of an egg, and now we're going to multiply it by 6. That's going to give us $1. And we're still going to go to the 4th decimal here, just so we can be as specific as possible with our pricing. Because as we start to round up, the pricing is going to get off for everybody because everybody's going to round a little bit differently. But we're gonna price it out like this, and at the very end we'll round. So the next one is the heavy cream. We're going to take the unit cost, which is 0.1225. And this time we need to look because this is per ounce and we have a 1/2 cup. So we know that in a 1/2 cup there are 4 ounces in a 1/2 cup. So we need to multiply 1.225 by 4. And that's going to give us 0.49. With our milk, we're doing it by the ounce. So again, we're doing 0.0329. And now, since we're looking at ounces, we need to see how many ounces are in a 1/4 cup. So we know that if there were 4 ounces in a 1/2 cup, half of a 1/2 cup is a 1/4 cup. And so that would mean we have 2 ounces. So we're going to multiply that by 2. And so our answer is going to be 0.0658. Okay, for spinach, again, we broke this down to the ounce. Here we don't have to do any converting because we're looking for ounces. So we're going to take 0.25, which is our unit cost, which is by the ounce, and we're going to multiply that by 8. So that's going to give us $2. Just put the dollar sign in front of all these so you don't get confused. Okay, for Parmesan, the same thing. So our unit cost is 0.46. We're looking for 4 ounces, right? So that's the same unit. So all we need to do is multiply the unit cost by the quantity. So that's 0.46 times 4. That's going to give us $1.84. Okay, so the next one is bacon. Our bacon was 0.3954 per ounce, and we're looking for 8 ounces, so we need to multiply that by 8. And our total amount for the 8 ounces of bacon in our recipe is $3. And 0.1632. Okay, and the pie crust, because we are only using one pie crust, all we have to do is just carry this number over because that's what's costing us for our recipe. Okay, so salt is a little bit different. When we are looking at salt, we need to know how many ounces are in salt because we broke it down to ounces, right? So 1 tablespoon is about a half an ounce, right? So 0.5. And so we need 2 tablespoons. So half an ounce is 0.5. And we need 2. That means we're only going to be needing 1 ounce. So really, if this was broken down to the ounce, that carries over because that equals 1 ounce of salt. So we don't really need to multiply anything because if it was 4 tablespoons, then maybe we would need to do times 2, right? Because we're adding more salt to the recipe. But because 1 tablespoon equals half of an ounce, and we measure to an ounce, we need to make sure that we have the correct measurement. So this is just going to carry over 0.024. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is, let me just highlight these, and I'm going to highlight them yellow instead. It's not yellow. Sorry. I'm going to make these yellow. Just so you know the difference. Oh, no, that wasn't good. Sorry. Let's turn them like a dark blue. Oops, no. Okay. So now we need to figure out, oops, ignore these. Now we need to figure out what our total recipe cost is. So we're going to be adding up everything in this column to get our total recipe cost. So $1.3128 plus 0.49 cents plus 0.0658 plus $2 plus $1.84 plus 3.1632 plus 0.0234. So our total cost of the total recipe cost is going to be $8.89. $8.89. Okay, and then we're going to have to divide that by the amount of portions. So we know that this quiche is going to equal out to 8 slices. So now we're going to take our number, our dollar amount for the total recipe cost, and we're going to divide it by 8 portions. So each recipe is going to cost us, each portion is going to cost us $1.11. And so now we need to mark up this recipe 3 times. So that means we're going to mark it up 300%. So we're going to multiply it by 3. So that's going to equal 2,333. So that's how much our menu item is going to cost us. So that's it. It's fairly easy as long as you know how to convert, right? You know how to change, and you know how many ounces are in a gallon, how many ounces in a pound. And if you don't, then there's a lot of conversion tables online that you can utilize. But ideally, you need to know how to get unit costs, and you need to know how to get your total amount, how to calculate the total recipe cost, which is just adding up all the values in this column, how to get your per portion cost, which is just dividing the total recipe cost by the amount of slice, by the yield of your recipe, and then how we're going to price it on our menu, which is we're going to mark it up 3 times or mark it up 300%. And again, this part of marking up really depends on your market, what's happening in your economy. And how we're going to price that depending on what your customer base can afford and the value of the product, right? So that is recipe costing. So this is exactly what you're going to do for your assignment. I'm just going to exit out of here and I'm going to go back to our assignment. Sorry. And so when you're done, you can just upload it, upload your submission, and I'll be grading that. Like I said, that your assignments are going to be due a little bit later than what the actual due date was. So not this weekend, but I'll probably extend it to the following weekend. You still have other assignments that are due as well. You have your costing assignment or your quiz one, which is part of the costing. I posted videos for both the P&L calculation examples. So if you have any questions or if you're still having issues with figuring out your P&L calculations, please let me know so that I can assist you. And then you have your recipe costing, which is the one we just went over. And then we have our costing part 2 assignment, which I'm going to show you really quick. This looks a little bit different, but very similar to what we've already been going over. We talked about sales, right? We talked about other expenses or total expenses. Here, revenue equals sales, right? So that's how much sales we had, whether it was probably a combination of food and beverage sales. So this is a large amount. Maybe it was for a month at a very big restaurant or in a more expensive market. And then we talked about food and beverage costs, labor costs, and other expenses, right? So here we're given the dollar amounts, but we're not given the percentages. So how are we going to figure that out? If you remember, I discussed how to figure out percentages, right? We took the percentage and multiplied it by our total sales, and that gave us our dollar amount. Well, now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take our revenue and now we're going to take these specific costs and divide it by our revenue. So if, for example, our food and beverage cost was 200,000, we're going to divide that by 800,000. And that's going to give us our percentage of food and beverage cost. So by that amount, our food and beverage cost for 200,000 of food and beverage dollar amount would turn out to be 25%. And so that's what you're really looking for when it comes to figuring out how to do your percentages here. Right here, it's asking you, what are the total expenses for the Tampopo Noodle House? Well, we know that all of our expenses are things that we're spending on, right? So we have to purchase food and beverage. We have to pay our employees, and we have to pay all of our other expenses, whether it's marketing, our music that we're going to have in the restaurant, our rent. So these other expenses would be things that we're paying for, right? So when it's asking for total expenses, you're probably going to have to add these up to get the total expenses, right? And then when it's asking for those percentages, that's what you're going to do. And then if you remember when we talked about profit, we have to, just like your bank account, you're going to have credits and debits, and then what's left over is what your balance of your account is. So that's the same thing here. Remember, revenues are sales, and then we're already going to get our total expenses when you calculate that out. So these are like our credits, and these are like our debits. So after all those are taken out, then we're going to have our balance. So that's going to be our profit, what we're left over with after removing all of our expenses, and what we can say is whether we're successful or not. So that's how you're going to figure out profit. If it asks you to figure out profit percentage, well, once you get your profit, then you can divide it by your revenue, and that should give you your percentage. Okay, so if anybody has any questions about this second part to your costing, please let me know. But that is everything. We've talked about gross profit. We've talked about profit in general. We talked about calculating food sales, taking percentages and turning them into the dollar amount. We talked about beverage and food costs, figuring out all of our other expenses. And now we figured out how to take the dollar amount and turn it into a percentage. And then just right now today, we talked about recipe costing. So you know how to break down a recipe, cost it out so that you can generate a menu item price based on those costs. And so that you can become profitable for that too, right? The last thing we want to do is underprice ourselves and not make money off of the work that we're doing and the ingredients that we buy. So this is all extremely important to this particular course, but to working in the workforce, whether you're going to be a manager, whether you're going to be an executive chef, or whether you're going to own your own business so that you can be successful and profitable. So very important that you understand all these different calculations and formulas. So that you can be a profitable business owner or employee. Okay, so that's everything for the costing and P&L module in module 5. I'm going to be posting this right now. So you already have your costing P&L terms. You have costing P&L calculations part 1, part 2, and then now you're going to have the you have link here for the those are all the different kinds of forms. Like I said, videos you're only going to use more or probably those as those a little more intricate and as an employee going through the workforce initially, you're probably unless you have a background in management, probably won't be getting into those detailed values. But if you have questions about them, I definitely reviewing next week is module 6. My computer is really slow right now. Let's see. So I'm just going to show you really quick. These are your tabs. Okay. Module 6, we're going to talk about customers, nutrition, and allergens. You can click on your customer's PowerPoint. I'll post that and you can review it and then answer your questions. So you are going to have a quiz too, and you're going to have an assignment on you're going to have an assignment on customer service. And then the next module is going to be menu design and being concept conscious. You also have your project that's coming up. I'll probably move this over so you can see it, but we're going to click on it and I'll talk about it a little bit. So you have this project coming up. It's a restaurant presentation. So this is going to be due next week. Whoops. Or like in a week and a half. Where'd it go? So in this one, let me just outline what you have to do. In a PowerPoint presentation, you can present the following information about any restaurant below or of your choice. And it must have been operating for 2 years. So in your first slide, you want to give me the history. How did they begin and where are they now? In your second slide, you want to give me their net worth. How much are they worth? And if you can find how much they started with, try to guess how much you think their food cost is. Slide 3 is going to be the menu. Show us their menu and explain which is the most popular or least item and what are they known for. Slide 4, we want to talk about the employees. How many employees do they have? What are the benefits or incentives? Are they hiring now? And then slide 5, what is the restaurant motto or culture? What are they about? What is their brand? Do they have a mission statement? Do they pride themselves in something specifically? And are they politically inclined? And then if you have any questions, please email me. This presentation is going to be 100 points. Here's some examples of large corporate restaurants that you can look into. But of course, you could use any restaurant that you can find information on. You're going to find a lot more information on these because they're well-known brands and they have various restaurants throughout the United States. So they have to have a lot of representation of who they are as a brand, what they stand for, what they do in their communities. So this is all good examples of places that you can use, but you're not limited to that. You can use any place as long as they've been operating for 2 years. So if you work at a restaurant and you want to interview your employer and ask information about that, or if you want to go to a restaurant that's local and talk to them about that and they want to give you that information, then you're more than welcome to do that as well. But again, these are some examples. This is due on July 3rd and fairly easy assignment to submit. Just 5 slides, but with this specific information. And again, if you have any questions, please email me or you can message me on Pronto about your assignment. So I'm going to move this up so that you guys can review it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't know what happened. Where'd it go? I'll put it in module 5. Open. You're so slow right now. Come on. Okay, so right after module 5, you can see this assignment. Okay, perfect. So that's going to end today's session on recipe costing. Again, if you guys have any questions, please let me know so that I can answer your questions for you. But y'all have a wonderful week. Let me know if you have any questions. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll continue updating your assignments as you finish them.